Welcome to the Healing Heart podcast, where all healing is always a matter of the heart. I'm your host, Donna Campbell, also known as the Mind Whisperer, interviewing guest experts on all matters of healing. Hi, everybody, and welcome back here to the Healing Heart podcast. I am your host, Donna Campbell. Now, my guest today, I truly am in love with. She is amazing, all the way over from the UK. She's a former fashion designer and a recovering actor. So Jackie Goddard is the founder of Power to Speak. She has over 25 years experience working in and around the performing arts as an actor, director, producer, and teacher. And she facilitating acting and voice workshops all over the globe. Now, as a coach and a speaker, Jackie uses her actor's training and life experience to get business leaders, solopreneurs, and speakers performance ready and excited about sharing their message or big idea. She shows them how to use their voice and story to impact, influence, and inspire their audience to show up with confidence and personality. So thank you, Jackie, for being here with me today.
Oh, it's a joy. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So one of the things that you talk about and that you share is helping people with that inner confidence to use their voice, whether it's in their career, on their stage, working with clients in that way. But how did you get started in doing that, and share with us some of your transformation that you went through?
Oh, that goes back a long way, Donna. You said there that I was a fashion designer. I should always have been an actor. And when I was at school in the playground, I was making up stuff. I was directing, producing, starring role, and then performing to my classmates. And I did that all the way through until obviously I got to my senior school and went off to my careers teacher, aged 16, I think I was. And she said to me, "What do you want to do when you leave school?" And I said, "I want to be an actor." And she kind of looked at me with a bit of a head tilt and a bit of a smirk. And she didn't quite laugh, but I could feel it was there. So she asked me a couple of questions and said, did I go to the theatre? And I said, well, no. I lived on an estate. Mm-hmm. It wasn't part of my cultural social life, the theatre, really, but I knew it was what I wanted to do. But she just said to me, "No, you don't want to be an actor." She said, "If you wanted to be an actor, you'd live, die and breathe the theatre. What else can you do?" So I ended up at art school, which was fine. I loved art. Mm-hmm. And from there ended up studying fashion. So I became a fashion designer in London back in the 80s. Mm-hmm. But it was really kind of the high street end, what we call over here as the rag trade end. And it wasn't very creative. It wasn't very enjoyable. And I didn't feel it. So I didn't feel like I was really where I should be. And I had a friend that at that point, I had also studied fashion with her, but she ended up going into the theatre. Mm-hmm. She worked at the Royal Shakespeare Company, which at the time was based in London. And so I got a job over there with her dressing actors, mm-hmm. Which was fun. And as soon as I walked into the building, I thought, this is it. I found my tribe. So I really kind of suddenly felt at home. And it was while I was there, I was 28. It was 5 weeks before my wedding. I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Wow.
Which is, yes, not what you expect when you're 28.
No.
And so that was a bit of a pivotal moment for me, as you would imagine, because faced with your own mortality, mm-hmm. at that age, you suddenly go, "Oh my God, what am I doing? You know, this is my life." You know, and it kind of pulled everything into a really sharp focus. And I at that point thought, well, I didn't really know where my life would lead at that point. I knew I wanted a baby. I was 28, 5 weeks before I got married, was thinking, I wanted a baby, but they were telling me that chemotherapy was probably going to put a stop to that, which was a bit of a shock. But I carried on. I went back to work. I carried on working at the Royal Shakespeare Company, and I dressed an actor called Toby Stevens, and he had just been on stage. We were doing a technical rehearsal. He'd been on stage simulating sex with a young actress under a sheet in the auditorium, and I was thinking how embarrassing for him, how excruciating for him to have to do that in front of all these people. And so after this scene, he came off for a quick change, and I said to him, "How can you do that? How can you do that without just being so embarrassed? You know, going red, and you know, all of those sort of embarrassing things." And he said to me, "If you don't believe what it is that you're saying, what it is that you're doing as an actor, then your audience won't believe you either." And it was a real light bulb, penny drop moment for me. Suddenly I thought, actually, that's true. It's not about, you know, when I say to people, oh, I'm an actor, when I was acting, they'd say to me, "Oh, you must be a really good liar. Somehow you're faking it." And actually what I learned in that moment is that you don't fake it. You don't play, you become it. You become it. Yeah. And so from that moment on, I understood what it was to be an actor, and the confidence of taking on a character. And so with the fact that obviously I'd had the breast cancer diagnosis, I'd been through all the treatment, I'd had chemotherapy, radiotherapy, I thought, I need to be an actor. That's what I need to be. So I went off to drama school, and I was by that point 29 going on 30. And from there, I had this kind of feeling that I was transformed at that point, you know, from those moments, from being told by the careers officer that I wasn't, you know, I couldn't be an actor. In that moment, I felt like I wasn't good enough. All of those things that I thought about myself, suddenly I thought she'd kind of confirmed them for me. So with the diagnosis and then this penny drop moment, as you know, from this actor, I thought, well, that's what I need to be doing. I need to be acting. And so from that moment on, that's what I became. And it wasn't, though, for me just about the acting. It was about I ended up in teaching because obviously the acting doesn't pay well, right, unless you know you're in that sort of very top 1% of people. And so I ended up teaching to kind of subsidize what it was that I was doing. And I did do some acting, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But what I loved about teaching was that I had that kind of ability to direct people, to kind of really coach people and support people as they then transformed. So as they then, the penny dropped for them that they could be rather than play. And that, I mean, you know, fast forward 20 years, kind of got me to a point where I was working with adults, and I was teaching them drama, I was teaching them acting, and I was working with actors and you know, going through monologues and devising scenes and improvisation. But the adults would come to me after a 2-hour session and say that was like therapy. And there was something in it that was really therapeutic for adults to be able and given permission to play, to cast aside everything, you know, that they walked into the room with, and actually collaborate, create, express, all of those things in that 2 hours. You know, I did with them exactly what I was doing with 10-year-olds, you know, with the 10-year-old classes that I'd been teaching. I'd do the same exercises, the same games, everything that I'd learned as an actor and that I did before going on stage. That's what I did with the adults. And I could see in that moment, working with them, that actually there was something really quite transformative and quite healing in what I was doing in that space with them.
Now, one of the things that you said was that your penny drop moment was all about becoming the role, becoming the person, becoming whatever was coming out, because that gave you that inner confidence, the believability, because you transform, or another word I like to use, shapeshift, into a different persona or a personality. Now, what I'm curious about is when you're working with, whether they're actors, speakers, business entrepreneurs, to own that part of themselves. In one regard, you're really teaching them to believe in themselves, but also in the role that they're playing to have that confidence. So what is one or two tips you might have that you use to help people really truly believe in what they're doing, but yet send out that message energetically, confidently, to receive back what they're asking for?
Yeah. I mean, I always start with a brain dump. So I always say to people, just the people that I work with generally have a message that they want to share. So they have a story that they want to tell. They, there's a reason for them wanting to get in front of their audience, and whether that's on a stage or in a Zoom room or in a boardroom or just across a dinner table, it could be anything, but they have to understand who it is that they're talking to and why the person they're talking to or the people they're talking to should care. Mm-hmm. And so to start with, I say to them, just everything that you want to say, whatever you think it is, just get it all out of your head and onto a piece of paper. Because that then, when we have, and I spoke to somebody recently that said we are story hoarders. Mm-hmm. And so if we keep the stories in our heads, there's no beginning and no end. They just are completely disorganized in our heads. And so that's why we just go over them and nothing ever gets resolved. Mm-hmm. So if you can get all of those stories out of your head and onto a piece of paper, then they've got an ending. They've got a beginning, a middle, and an end, which mm-hmm. is, when I was an actor, when I was in classes devising with people, that's what I'd say to them, right, we're going to devise a piece, we're going to make it up, but it needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. Mm-hmm. And so that's your story. And then that's a place that you can really then start saying, okay, which part of my story and which part of the experiences that I've had are going to be beneficial to my audience. Mm-hmm. So once you've got it all out there, that's when you can start picking out and this is what I do with people. I do big mind maps, and we kind of get it all out onto a big map. And then we can pick out the pieces that are really going to land with the audience. That this happened to me, and this is what I learned from it. This is what transformed me, and this, and so that people in the audience can then say, I completely resonate with that. I relate to that. That's happened to me. And so you as a speaker are validating their experience. And that's really what you're looking to do, is that when you're a speaker or when you have a message to share, it's not about you. And it was Nancy Duarte did a fabulous TED talk. She writes speeches for people, I think. But actually her TED talk was about the shape of a talk, and she looked at Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, Steve Jobs' speeches, and she kind of laid them over each other and could see that there was actually a pattern in how these presentations were put together, when she took people up, when when the speaker took people to a different level. And she said that actually the way you need to think about it is that in terms of the hero's journey, which I do love to talk about, we're all heroes of our own journey. You need to think of yourself as the mentor. So you're the Yoda to the audience's Luke Skywalker. So you are there for them. They're not there for you. And I think that's something that if you can kind of get your head around that, and then when you're looking at a presentation or a speech and looking at your stories, then that's a good beginning point, because you can then say, okay, well, that story will really relate and resonate with my audience.
Mm-hmm. And what was her name again for the TED Talk?
Nancy Duarte.
Okay.
Duarte.
Okay, so I know a lot of you are out there listening to our podcast here, but yes, always an avid learner. So I'm taking notes here as well along the way. So I hope that all the rest of you are getting something really good and amazing with this. So as you go through those tips of sharing to ignite that inner confidence, to believe in yourself, doing that brain dump, all of those things, when you're sharing with others, how does that invoke that inner confidence on the inside by getting all of the stuff out of the head, showing that you're there for the audience, you're validating them and their experience? How does that bring in confidence for the speaker?
because you take ownership of your story. They are your stories. And no matter what experience you've been through, and this is what I found, this is the healing part in me, and this is why I know that it works, is because it took me eight years after my cancer diagnosis to actually talk to anybody, to actually open up. I spent 8 years feeling like a victim, feeling like it had happened to me. Why had it happened to me? Everything that I went through in that 8 years, I carried on trying for a baby. I ended up, thankfully, having my beautiful daughter a few years later. But in that 8 years, I was trying to be brave for everybody else. There was part of me that felt like a bit of a failure, that I wasn't capable, that somehow I'd brought this on myself. And it wasn't until I actually owned that story, until I got it out of me, and I went to see a therapist, and she didn't say a word, I have to say. And that was exactly what she was there for, was I just let it all out, and she was just there to listen. And once I'd been through that process, I was then able to stand back and say, do you know what, I'm not a victim in this. I am a victor. I'm a survivor. I am I should be proud and take ownership of those stories. And I suppose really it wasn't until we all kind of went into lockdown, and suddenly I was able to step off of the treadmill that we all get on when we're trying to, put a life together with kids and families and work and all of those things. Once I was able to step back and look at what I had achieved, I could see that actually taking ownership of my story and being proud of who I was, and realizing that my story is my unique selling point as a business owner, as a founder of a company, as me, as a mother. I should be proud and realize that actually there's nobody else in the world that has been on the journey that I've been through. And I found that really healing. And that's what I encourage other people to do, is I think once you've looked back at the experiences, and they might be because you've lived them, quite often you don't value them. You think, oh, well, I went through that. Nobody wants to hear about that. Nobody, I'm a little bit embarrassed or a little bit ashamed of that. I'd rather just not talk about it. But until you kind of actually put it out there and speak to other people about it, you don't realize how important your experience has been. And I think once you've taken ownership of that and said, that's my story, and that I'm proud of who I am and what I've been through, no matter what it is, it's my unique selling point, my USP, then I think that's very healing.
Okay. So everybody, you are listening here to the Healing Heart podcast. My guest today is Jackie Goddard, and we've been talking about using your voice and healing and speaking and having that inner confidence, sharing your story. But we're going to take that real quick sponsor break, and we'll be right back in a moment. Get what you always wanted. Abundant life is possible. Transform your lifestyle in just weeks with the most innovative system developed for heart-centered business professionals who seek change today. You are one step away from creating infinite prosperity, happiness, and love. Grab your bonus link now that's in the show notes. All right, welcome back to the Healing Heart podcast, and I am your host, Donna Campbell. And our guest today is Jackie Goddard, and we've been talking all things healing with the voice, speaking, believability, confidence, and we were talking about owning your story and why it's important to own your story. What I'm really curious about, Jackie, is that for me, the very first podcast I was ever a guest on, it was a live podcast, and it was called Stories of Healing, of sharing your own personal story of your deepest, darkest moments and how you overcame that and how you transformed into healing. And when I did that podcast and I shared openly, it was the very first time I ever shared this story, my host, who was in his 20s, triggered because our stories were connected. And he was a child of the situation that I spoke about. that I experienced as an adult. And he couldn't think of his questions, and he kind of went into shock a little bit. And after the recording, well, actually it was live, so there was like no changing anything. We talked for quite a while, and he's become a really good friend of mine. But more recently, when we talk about owning our story, it's a story I've shared, but ever since that moment, I like downplayed it a little bit or placated it a little bit, because you don't want to trigger your entire audience, right? And recently, I was talking with another person. We were talking about TEDx stages and formats and how to share it. And as coach taught me, when you share your story, speak of it as if it's in the present moment. So in that moment that we were having dinner and she asked me a question, I did. And I shared that same story as if it was happening. And in that moment, she triggered, got up, and walked into the kitchen for a few minutes, because there was a connection somehow to her own story. So how do you own your story, share it with your audience, knowing that parts of it is their story, without them getting completely triggered and wanting to leave, so they can hear to get to the end of how you can help them or how you can validate them more, help them transform? Is there like a little secret method to that? Because if I downplay it, nothing happens. If I share it just like it is, then they can't hear the rest of it. Or maybe it's not that story I should be sharing. It should be something else.
Well, that's a good question, Dawn. I've never been asked that before. All I can say is from the experience of sharing myself is just let them. I shared my breast cancer journey on LinkedIn, which is not necessarily a place that you would imagine that, people would want to hear about that sort of thing. But it was Cancer Awareness Week, and I put up, and it started out literally. I put up a photograph of me on my wedding day, age 28, and I just kind of wanted people to know that I was thinking, I'd been through it myself, and I was thinking about other people that were going through it. But as I started writing the post, I obviously explained my story. But at the end, it kind of turned into something completely different. It turned into me saying, basically, I went through this nearly 30 years ago, and I'm still here. And I know how it felt back then to not be able to talk to anybody else that had survived this long. And so I was able in that post to say, look, I'm here now. I'm the person that I wanted to talk to back then. And so that's what I put. That's how the post ended up, was me saying, look, here I am, come and find me. I might not be able to help you, but you can talk to me. And I was gobsmacked. Apart from anything else, my posts on LinkedIn, I'm lucky if I reach 1,000, up 500,000 impressions. This one did like 12,000. And I was approached by several people, and it was just really nice to just be able to talk to them. So I wasn't saying that I could help them, but I was just there for them. And I think maybe that's kind of all you can do. Is there's no point wanting to hide the story or downplaying the story, because that's not being authentic. You're not doing them. You're doing them an injustice by not being completely truthful. But you just need to let them know that you're there to support them. And I think that's all you can do, really. And I've gone on since then to help other people. So I've sort of been part of guest blogs and sort of sharing my story in that way.
Okay. So what I'm really curious about, because yes, on formats like LinkedIn and other places like that, it's always going to reach the audience. And if they're ready to reach out to you, they will. But when you're in front of a live audience and you don't want them all to trigger or leave, because they have the ability to get up and actually leave from in front of you, is there a way to use your voice, share your story so that you can communicate, be authentic, have that confidence, own it, but yet still validate them and showing them that there's a way to transform for them in the healing world?
Yeah, I mean, I think exactly this, the way that you've just said it there. You use the pitch and the tone of your voice to let them know that that this is something that's happened, but you have transformed from it, and there's no reason why they shouldn't. So you kind of use your voice in a way. I mean, there's sort of different elements of your voice kind of thing. So you've got, you know, a deep authoritative voice, or you're talking from your passion from your belly, or sort of warmth from your heart, and then there's this kind of empathetic, inspirational voice that comes, like this sort of little baby voice that comes out of the top of your head. And it's learning how to use all of those different levels of your voice so that you can communicate, and so people kind of understand what it is that you're trying to get across, in what kind of, whether you're being empathic, whether you're listening and being supportive, whether you're passionate about what it is that you're saying, whether you're speaking with love and from the heart. And so we can use all of those different levels in our voice to reach and evoke emotion in the audience. And so in that same way, you can, as you're speaking, the audience can understand that actually you are there for them, and there is the ability to transform. And certainly if you're in a space like that, then it's worth making sure that people know that there are other people around that they can go and talk to, or there's a way of connecting or contacting or taking it to another, there's another step that they can take, that they don't have to just leave the room and not speak to anybody or talk to anybody about their experience.
Wow. All of that incredibly helpful and incredibly insightful. One of the last question here that I have for you is, you know, the Healing Heart podcast, I believe all healing is a matter of a heart. So when you work with the different types of people and they learn to use their voice and they're owning it, they're confident, they believe, what is the type of healing, or how does their heart space transform with what you've seen to what their results are? Yes, the voice, but how did their lives change?
Wow. I have seen, I had one lady came to one of my voice workshops a couple of years ago, before lockdown, obviously. And I always start with us sitting in a circle, and we kind of go around and just introduce each other and find out why we're there and everything else. And the last woman who was sat next to me, actually, we went through the circle, went around the circle and got to her, and she cried. She couldn't even speak. She couldn't actually open her mouth and say, my name is, this is the reason I'm here. And so through working through that particular workshop, and then, well, I mean, that was 6 hours, and she was kind of, by the end of it, she was up for standing up, and she was stepping in front of the audience and playing the games and being part of it. And she went on to, then she started coming to my drama classes, my acting classes as an adult. And from that, she now goes for auditions. She's had a couple of acting roles. And I mean, the testimonials that she gives me are glowing, because she just says it's transformed her life, just her confidence. She had agoraphobia at 19 and couldn't leave the house. And so it's just been a slow process for her to build her confidence. But just to be able to get in a space and take ownership of who you are, and understand that nothing bad's going to happen, that actually you are enough.
Yes.
You can, you know, I say to people, oh, we're going to do some improvisation, and you see people's faces go, I'm not going to do that. That's awful. But actually we improvise all the time. I'm improvising right now, as you know, we talk to each other without knowing what response we're going to get. You know, we open our mouths not knowing what's going to come out. And so in the process of working with what I do, I suppose it's kind of a coaxing, but what I find is it's giving people permission to actually say, because lots of people have been through stuff through parents, school, teachers, like my careers officer, all of those people that kind of put you down or put you in a box or won't let you speak. when you give people permission to speak and just say, look, you can be you, show up with your personality. Your personality is absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with who you are or what you have to say. Mm-hmm. And I give them permission to do that, to play, to be part of a group, to collaborate, to create, to be creative. And that in itself is just transformative. Because they leave the room laughing and on another level that because they've made connections that weren't there before.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you just dropped a lot of wisdom and nuggets there with all of that and giving yourself permission. And I think that there is so incredibly important. All right. So how do people get in touch with you to learn more, to access your programs, all of that fun stuff?
Well, the website, I suppose, is the first place. So that's powertospeak.co.uk. And you can get in contact with me through that. There's my blogs are on there. The podcast I have is called Power to Speak, the podcast, and that is on all of the podcast platforms. I'm just thinking, because I now do a live called Speaking About Speaking, which is coming back on the 14th of March, and that goes out live to LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. And so that's Speaking About Speaking. But I'm on LinkedIn, Jackie Goddard, Power to Speak. So please do come and follow, connect, message me. I'd love to hear from people. I'd love to find out what people's stories are, actually.
Yes. And thank you. We're going to put all of that information, everybody, into the show notes. So all you have to do is when you pull up the podcast is just click on the link and you can get in touch with Jackie as well. Any last closing thoughts or remarks that you have?
No, I do have a newsletter where I put out quite a lot of this information. So you can sign up for the newsletter on the Power to Speak website as well.
I love that. All right. Well, thank you so much for being a guest here today. All about speaking and confidence and believability and giving yourself permission. I absolutely love it. And for all of you listeners out there for the Healing Heart podcast, just go create that beautiful day.